Good afternoon. The Design Review Board 2 public meeting of May 22, 2008 is called to order. Please refrain from talking among yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones and pagers. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be called to present a case or speak on any specific item as desired. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive our notice of subsequent meetings. Current DRB agendas are available by calling our DRB hotline at 818-548-3171 or by visiting our website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB reconsideration and appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note that appeals must be filed within 7 calendar days of the DRB decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at her discretion. Can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Board Member Carter?
Here.
Board Member Garagos?
Here.
Board Member Malikian?
Here.
Board Member Zarifian is absent. Board Member Friedman?
Here. Could we have the report regarding the posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on May 15th, 2008. A revised agenda was actually posted on May the 21st, but that revised agenda has been withdrawn, and we will proceed with the original agenda.
Okay. Do we have any? I have no cards for oral communications. Next order of business is the election of a new chair. Do we have any nominations?
A nomination?
Why don't you
nominate Mr. Malikian?
And I'll second that nomination.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Mr. Malikian.
Mr. Malikian. Okay. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Carter?
Aye.
Board Member Garagos?
Aye.
Board Member Malikian?
Aye.
Chairperson Friedman?
Aye. We switch now? All right.
Chris, thank you very much for your
Stewardship.
service.
Thank you. Switch names too.
Again, thank you, Board Member Friedman, for your year of service, and congratulations, Chairperson Malikian.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll make my pen.
There you go. All right. Thank you for the nomination, and thank you, Laura, for a great job. And hopefully I can move the meetings along as fast as you have been doing. So we'll try. I would just want to just state that I'm going to make sure that everybody that is going to be coming up and speaking for a project, and if the board members have a question, basically keep their question very brief, and also not have a dialogue and discussion, open discussion, and if we need to later on after the public session is closed, and if we need to bring the person that we are questioning back up and ask them, so we can move this process along.
Can I make a request?
Absolutely.
That you not always hold your comments until the end, that you sometimes feel free to speak up a little earlier, because sometimes I like to hear your comments before your personal comments.
I'll
that
try.
You retain that option.
I will do my best.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so moving on, staff announcements. Any? Okay. So we don't have anything on the consent calendar, so we're down to the design review cases. Before we start, there's one item in the agenda that we would like to continue, and I'm going to take that out of order, which is the second one, which is B2 PDR 2007-100-A 1749 Allen Avenue. So we would like to continue that to June 5th. I would like to get a motion on that.
Making a motion to postpone for 2 weeks, 2 PDR 2007-100-A.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion made by Board Member Garagos, a second by Board Member Carter. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Carter?
Aye.
Board Member Friedman?
Aye.
Board Member Garagos?
Aye.
Chairperson Malikian?
Yes.
The motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, going back up the order, the first one on the item, 2BDR-2007-154A, continuance from, I guess, as we continued from the prior.
Yes,
meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Okay, so first order of business is, again, case number 2-PDR-2007-154-A. This case was continued from May 8th. The project location is 1734 Idlewood Road. The applicant is Lisa Henderson. If I may quickly walk the board through the...
Before you even, could you just tell me, I wasn't here, what the reason for the continuance was?
The applicant was unable to make it.
Got it.
It's been continued for 2 weeks. Just going over quickly the setup here. This is the proposed site plan along with the existing site plan, roof plan, landscape, roof, actually first and second story, proposed elevations, and some perspectives located over here on this board, along with the neighborhood photograph survey for the board's larger view of the case. Yes, Ms.
Could staff please make a note, there's a correction, which is that this is not the Brockmont district, this is Cumberland Heights, as far as I know. This is one of your plans, one of your neighborhood plans is incorrect. They keep putting things in Brockmont that are clearly Cumberland Heights or El Miradero. This is definitely not Brockmont.
We'll make a note of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, on to the project proposal. The project proposal is to construct a 190-square-foot addition to the first floor and a 274-square-foot addition to the second floor of an existing two-story building on a 10,690-square-foot lot. The project will also include demolishing an existing two-car garage and adding a new 400-square-foot attached garage. Now, if I may show the board on the site plan, the existing garage remains detached with the same street access. It will now be placed to the new addition, also with a turn radius off of Material Road. This project is exempt from CEQA review, and this project is located in the R1 Residential District, Floor Area District 1. Would the board like me to go over the neighborhood design guidelines or to the recommendations and comments made by staff?
Recommendations?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right, so comments that staff has regarding the site planning. Staff feels that the site planning, overall the location of the addition, driveway, garage, and landscape design appears to be an improvement to the existing condition and provides a less visible garage and provides a more generous landscaping at the rear and is appropriate to the subject property and neighborhood context, in that these modifications on site design are consistent with the surrounding properties. Second would be the mass and scale. Staff feels that the project's mass and scale is broken down into a variety of forms. The modest second-story addition continues the same roof line and provides a patio with the space below. The patio space has arched columns that tie in nicely to the overall Spanish colonial theme. The architectural style, staff feels that the details and materials of the architectural style in the addition is consistent with the Spanish colonial theme. The building appears to be well designed and appropriate for the neighborhood. Now for the overall summary. The modest addition to the Spanish colonial house is designed with high quality materials and details that reinforce and enhance the architectural design of the house. The mass and scale do not increase significantly as a result of the addition and appear to be appropriate also for the neighborhood. If I may, just a side quick note here, the applicant has provided a landscape plan. Since then, the site plan has been modified slightly. There may be some inconsistencies. The landscape plan has not been modified to reflect the new site plan. Very small minor changes, but there's just some proposed work.
Do you have any photos or any materials?
Yes.
Yes.
Just wanted to mention, this staff report includes, as part of the recommendations, a draft record of decision. We'll have this issue as a discussion item on your next meeting, but we wanted to let you know that this is one of the changes that council has directed us to make, to include some analysis as part of the record of decision. And so as part of our recommendation, we have started to make a draft so that can be easier for you. We can read that again into the record after the discussion and then also modify it based on the discussion.
And we can go ahead and modify this anyway.
This is just part of the recommendation. You can modify any part of it, not include any part of it, but we would like to start including some justification and analysis for the decision as part of the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from staff?
I just have one question. I think it's very well done. Did you talk about the kitchen window? It just looks a little out of place the way you look on the second elevation down, the kitchen window.
This
In
one
the
right
arcade,
here?
yeah.
This one right here?
Yeah, it
I
looks a little
believe
out of character.
the applicant actually is going to address that
Yes,
when
okay.
she speaks. There is a new proposal, I believe, for that particular.
Yeah, it's very well done.
Thank you.
Stuck out.
Actually, there are letters of support for the proposal. And let me just read it this time. Okay. And here are the photographs and material board for the proposed project. Does the board have any questions that I may answer at this time? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Lisa Henderson?
Good evening.
Good evening. And state your name and
For
address.
the record, yes, I'm Lisa Henderson. I'm the architect for the project. Would you like to ask me any questions, or do you want me to talk about that kitchen window first?
If you want to present anything,
It's up to you. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Oh, okay.
And talk about anything you want.
I can know that, okay. Gabe just said that I was going to come up here and answer questions you had. So I think he did a really great job of presenting everything. We tried to maintain the massing of the house and be sensitive to the colonnade on the front side, which you see on the top elevation. You see the end of it where they come in by that curved picture window. So we've reflected that on the rear elevation, which on the second one down, which shows two of those to be garage doors, which are stained grade wood doors, and then it continues along with three more elements of the colonnade, which then brings you into double doors and the kitchen window. So we really tried to minimize that, and then we wanted to reuse the existing curb cut and then curve it down so that on that second elevation, it's really hard to see in 3 dimensions, so you're going to have to look over at the perspective, but from the street, you're really not going to have that view. It's never going to be flat like that, but you're going to really minimize the look of the garage and the garage doors and how you would see it from the street. In terms of color and materials, it's in keeping with what's there already. Textures are the same. We have replacement wood window companies. I've got some details and literature if you guys would like to have a look at it, but it's meant to look exactly like the original wood windows. Usually we like to specify that it's laminated glass, so it doesn't have that dual pane kind of a look to it, but it's got a good sound value and it's got a good R value to it. You can have the muntins be really skinny. And the one kitchen window, we actually wanted to make a special request that wasn't on the door and window schedule that we submitted. Since we've submitted this, we were looking at it and hoping that maybe, similar to some of the other Spanish colonial houses, we could do something where we have a metal window incorporated as the kitchen window. And there's a lot of precedent in a lot of the books of that era to show that type of window. It's pretty obscured from the view of the street. It's also pretty obscured from the backyard because it's behind the colonnade. But it would be kind of a different, interesting little gem that you find all over the house with the different elements of the architecture. And again, in terms of materials, the roof is the same as it's existing. It would be the
Are
same.
you
material.
asking to change the window to that style from?
Yes,
from
that
the-
is a
Okay,
request.
that's
What we have actually shown, it looks the same as it's drawn, but what we show on the door and window schedule is for it to be wood. But we're
Gotcha.
requesting that we could
Be
change that to be
steel.
the metal on that one window only.
Okay, we'll go ahead and consider that. I have one question for you.
Sure.
On the, it seems like you got a couple of different site plans, one for the landscaping, the other is the actual site plan, a little bit different. Which one are you going with, first of all?
The one at the top, the
one
only
at the top.
differences are that what we had originally hoped to have was to have a trash enclosure.
Okay.
It's kind of hard for me to point from this far away, but
If you want to...
am I allowed to come back?
Yes.
Okay. What we have articulated here in the original one was for form and function is to have a trash enclosure that's only as high as the trash cans themselves, that's got a plaster wall, and then the front of it would be an ornate wrought iron gate that's similar to the one that's at the front here right now. And then that way you would be able to open it up. You'd come up the stairs from the kitchen and put your trash here, and then on trash day you would take it out there. But we were told that that doesn't work because it's within 6 feet of the street.
Right,
So on this one, we've taken that out.
I see. Okay, my question to you is, you're showing on this perspective, you also, I mean, the way I see it is, this is the house.
Right, this
Okay.
one right here.
And the way that this contours are showing, it seems like it's you're putting this house on the top of the hill, but it's actually not. So,
No.
so my question to you is that you've placed these large retaining walls both sides of this driveway. I'm just wondering, is it true the way that the perspective is showing here, or is it something that it's lower or something?
Well, it's definitely lower. I mean, this here is less than 18 inches high.
Okay.
So the way that the grade goes and continues down,
What would be the I don't see.
this would only be about
actually.
4 feet high down here.
But what elevation would you set this to be? Proposed grade elevation 496?
What are you pointing at? Oh, that's the square footage
Okay.
on the right.
Okay.
So right here, well, this starts at 115 and then goes down to
Down there,
111.
so
So
you're
it's
going to
about
have a
4
retaining
feet,
wall. Okay.
which is about what I was assuming it to be right down here.
Okay, but my question is this going to be lower than this space, or is this the same
it's the
height?
same.
So this retaining wall is pretty much, you got a retaining wall here, you got a retaining wall here, you created this.
Right, the retaining wall on this side isn't really a
It's a-
retaining
it's a
wall, it's
railing,
more of a
more of a
railing
railing.
or a demarcation
Okay.
of space.
And then this wall right here that is retaining 4 foot of dirt, is the wall above there, so that what I'm saying is, if you stand here, you got a 4 foot difference, the way it looks, you got another 30 inch or 36 inch, so you're gonna have almost a 7 foot tall wall that you're gonna be looking at when you're standing
On
here.
the
So-
inside.
On the inside, is that how it's supposed?
That's the way that we have it right now.
Okay.
And again, the height of that was determined based on originally having those,
Okay,
the trash cans there.
okay.
But to pull that down is always an option.
Okay.
Before I leave,
Absolutely.
yeah, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious what the reason was on the top elevation that's from the front. I was wondering why you chose, you have on the side elevation, you have you have a window in the garage there.
Right.
I was wondering why you chose to not put one in the front also, so that from the
Right
front of
here?
the house. Yeah.
There's a considerable amount of landscaping there, so we felt like we would be really minimizing that, the greenery and the lush landscaping that also contributes to the beauty of the house. So we made a conscious effort to just have it on this side and then not have it on the other. And then just purely the pragmatics of having storage in the garage at the end of the garage and being able to have shelving and things like that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Terry Matthew? Or,
They had said that they didn't know if they wanted to speak.
if you...
If anyone had questions and wanted to...
Okay. And then we'll just keep this in the record. If you don't have any more questions, I'll go ahead and close the hearing. You want to go first?
I haven't done that for a year. Start. I don't have any problems with it. I think it's a very nicely done addition, very sensitive. It's very nice to see, and I also agree with leaving them the option of using the metal window that they desire in the back. So I'd be fine with passing it with just that as a condition.
Okay.
My only comment is, I live in this neighborhood, and I'm a relatively new member of the board here, and I just wish that there were 20 of these that I could vote aye on. But looking at this house, it has a generous 36-foot street front setback. All of that's been preserved. These houses in this neighborhood have architectural value, but they're often very cranky little rooms, and people do want a little more access to them. And I'd just like to compliment you on, you've achieved that in a very sensitive way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fine, and just the issue about the window you clarified, which was nice. I was just curious, the Spanish one is more of a horizontal layout to the windows as you do on the others, and so that was the thing that really struck me initially was that it was a vertical planes to those windows, so that they might want to, just to suggest that it might be horizontal to sort of be in keeping with it. On the kitchen, yeah, on the kitchen possibly. That's sort of what's stuck to me, so just a comment.
Okay. I concur. I think it's a very nice project. I would add one item. If you can consider lowering those retaining walls, I feel that it's unnecessary to create this, high retaining walls as you go down, and maybe lower the handrail part of it, if you can lower that, and then maybe open up the other side. It's up to you. It's a consideration. It's a consideration. It's not if you can consider that, that would be great, and I think it would definitely open up that area. Other than that, I don't have any other comments. As far as the draft decision and recommendations, do we see anything that we would like to change on that, or we would like to go with the way that the staff has prepared it?
I'll make a motion to accept the draft recommendations as stated. I don't know if we're supposed to make a motion for these, because we haven't been given the correct procedure.
It would essentially be a motion to either approve with conditions, in this case, approve with conditions or considerations,
Okay.
and then stating that you concur with the draft record of decision.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to accept the project with the two considerations, neither of which are conditions, they're both recommendations, and also to accept the staff record of decision.
I would second that motion.
May I clarify that the two considerations are giving the applicant the option to have metal-clad windows and
Only the,
It's a
steel window.
Steel
Okay.
Steel window.
option to have a steel window in that one condition.
Kitchen window.
Kitchen window, and would you like to add a consideration that the
panes be
configuration,
horizontal.
that
panes
it be made more horizontal, and to also consider lowering the retaining walls and maybe open up the other side of the driveway?
Right.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
These are all considerations, they're not, so you can go ahead and,
I was just going to say
follow.
that horizontal...
Oh, I'm sorry. We were going to have to, we can't have people cross speaking, but if you'd like, Chairperson Malikian could open it up if you'd like to. Hear her
Is it-
comment.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary. Okay.
Discussion. It's a
Okay, well,
It's a
then we
consideration.
have a motion and we have a
Second.
second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Friedman to approve the project with considerations, also to consider the staff comments or recommendations for approval. A second by Mr. Carter. This will be roll call. Ms. Friedman?
yes?
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Garagos?
yes.
And Mr. Malikian?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
Very nice. All right. Moving along. Our last project, 1200 East Colorado, DRB number 2, PDR 2007-129-A.
Chairman Malikian, board members, the case before you is case number 2-PDR 2007-129A. The project is located at 1200 East Colorado. The applicant is WD Partners, and the property owner is May J Realty Company. This is the first time submittal for final review. The project consists of demolishing the existing structures, including a fast food and a retail building, and to construct a new approximately 13,970 square foot retail food store with 59 on-site parking spaces on a combined lot area of 53,290 square feet. As you notice here in the photographs that are before you of the existing lot, the project consists of the Burger King existing site, and then there's also a Suit site. It has frontages on 3 streets, including Colorado, Chevy Chase, as well as Wing Street. The property itself is zoned C3, Height District 1. It butts R3050 zoning, so you have residential multifamily dwellings to the south. You have commercial dwellings, or not commercial dwellings, in this case, you have a commercial retail and auto repair facility to the north. To the east, you have a church, and to the west, you also have a commercial auto repair. The project is located in the Colorado Street commercial area number 13, which is designated as a highway commercial and neighborhood commercial zone. The street itself primarily consists of quite a few retail and service-type uses, including various strip malls. There is no overall architectural theme or style to the Colorado Street itself. As you see before you, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly walk through the project as well as addressing the various issues listed in the commercial urban design guidelines. The first item addressed in the commercial design guidelines is the site plan. As you see here, you have Chevy Chase, you have Colorado, and you have Wing Street. The building essentially sits on the southeast corner of Colorado and Chevy Chase. You have parking accessed from both Chevy Chase, a 2-way driveway, and another 2-way driveway off Colorado. The building addresses primarily Colorado Street with a front entrance, as you note here, in the northeast corner of the building. There is, again, more orientation both from the interior of the parking lot and from the Colorado Street. The commercial design guidelines recommend that buildings be placed to the front and that parking be placed to the rear. And again, so this particular project conforms or is compatible with what the design guidelines propose. There is a slight setback on Colorado Street, which is approximately 10 feet, which they have provided landscaping in that area, as well as an approximately 9-foot setback from the Chevy Chase. So it doesn't go directly abutting the front property lines on Colorado and Chevy Chase, but there is a little bit of relief. However, it addresses that particular corner. Staff, in this case, has had has had meetings, and again, this was actually another case planner's project, and so I was not present at these meetings, but based on feedback and history of discussions, there were comments made by our principal urban designer, Alan Loomis, and our senior urban designer, Stephanie Wright, in which the building could actually be located on the northeast corner of the site and have the parking located on the Chevy Chase in Colorado. But I'm going to go into that a little bit further on. But in summary, the building does address the build to sidewalk specifications proposed in the urban design guidelines for commercial zones. Courtyards and usable open space. In this case, in this particular project, none is being provided, and none is really appropriate for this building type, so that is not applicable. The parking arrangement. This is a retail commercial use. It has a parking requirement of 4 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of area. The building itself is approximately 14,000 square feet. There is a required number of 56 parking spaces on site. They have 3 additional parking spaces above what is required by code. Just once more to repeat that the placement of parking lots behind the building is encouraged by the guidelines, and so this project complies with that. It also, by having the driveways on Colorado and Chevy Chase, it keeps traffic to a minimum on Wing Street, which is appropriate because Wing Street is primarily a pedestrian and a residential street. So the location of the driveways is appropriate for this project as well. The issue regarding the loading dock. So you see before you, the loading dock is located on the south edge of the building, on the south elevation. Its location is somewhat problematic simply because the multifamily residential residents directly to the south essentially look straight in across the parking lot into the loading dock. There was a concern perhaps that there could be more effective screening, whether the wall right now, which is proposed to be 8 foot high to screen, could actually be increased, or that the loading dock could somewhat be covered, either covered with a trellis or some other permanent structure to have more screening from the residential, for the residents to the south. The physical design components, as listed in the urban design guidelines, include building mass and scale. This is a 1-story commercial structure. It has an overall height to the parapet of 20 feet, primarily overall for the building. There is what has been deemed by the applicant or called a sail, and this would be a sail that increases up to 30 feet in height. It's one of the signature design elements for the project. So you see before you, this would be what staff and what the applicant has referred to as a sail. It's basically an angled parapet projection above, and so it delineates this front entrance. And then as you see here, there is also an awning, a metal awning that reinforces that front entrance. So the overall building height, although it's only 20 feet, it has this architectural projection above that 20-foot parapet line to a total of 30 feet. Still, in relation, when you compare this particular project to the surrounding 1- and 2-story commercial buildings along Colorado, as well as the 1-, 2-, and 3-story residential buildings both south on Wing Street, it is compatible with the surrounding building mass and scale of the neighborhood. The design components. Primarily that the only true significant design component for the project is the signature sail and canopy above the northeast entrance corner. Otherwise, the building is stuccoed. There are details both along, this would be the easterly elevation facing the parking lot. So essentially this elevation corresponds to this particular front elevation. You have the entrance here, and then also at the very top elevation, you'll notice that that particular elevation is the storefront that is addressing the Colorado Street facade. These both have landscape and forgive me, also this would be the particular elevation facing Chevy Chase. So both the Chevy Chase elevation as well as the interior elevation facing the parking lot have landscape trellis features or green screens or something similar in those lines to sort of break up the wall plane. They have painted vertical columns and tall stucco green bands across the cream exterior wall color. And again, this is to actually create some sort of rhythm for these elevations. This is definitely an improvement from the original submittal, which actually included the rear elevation, the south elevation, and also the
Where's the
Chevy
original?
Chase. It's not up. So if you'd like, I can put that up. But the original one actually had just a blank CMU block wall, and so effort has been made to change those two elevations. Whereas previously, this particular elevation and the one facing Chevy Chase were just blank CMU walls. They are now color schemed and treated in a similar fashion as the other two elevations. The one aspect that I'd like to note at this point in time as well, that the urban design guidelines, when it comes to design components, actually encourages that street elevations be activated. And this has been discussed with the applicant in the previous meetings with the urban designers and the previous project planner, that the street elevation on Chevy Chase is somewhat blank except for these trellis features and the columns. There is more opportunity at this particular elevation to provide either storefront windows or somehow or rather activate that street frontage, whereas at this point in time it is somewhat lost, and the main entrance and the main storefront fields are only located along Colorado, facing obviously the main street, but then the interior facing the parking lot. So, architectural details essentially consist of stucco storefront windows on the north elevation, the signature sail, and an entrance canopy obviously above the northeast corner of the building. There are 3 color schemes, obviously for corporate colors for Fresh and Easy. It would be the Herb Garden, the California Hills, and the Philadelphia Cream. So the painting is used to somewhat offset the elevations. Roof forms. Again, this is primarily a flat roof form except for that signature sail element. No rooftop equipment is being proposed, so there is no issue regarding any type of required screening or the fact that the parapet has to be raised in order to screen rooftop equipment, because there's none proposed.
Where are they going to put it?
They are actually going to put it within the building, as you see in this particular one. I know that the maintenance kiosk is here. Mechanical equipment is going to be directly adjacent to the loading dock. There has been a change as well to the roof forms. The previous proposal that actually had the blank CMU walls had no cornice treatment. There has been an effort made to adhere to the design guidelines, which essentially call out some sort of parapet treatment, and so the applicant has responded by providing a cornice detail along all 4 elevations. However,
This was done because of?
This was done in response to provide some more consistency with the urban design commercial guidelines. But again, we question whether or not this cornice treatment is appropriate for the overall design of the building. In regards to service facilities and mechanical equipment screening, service facilities, again, obviously are taken off the loading dock to the rear. There is an existing 8-foot CMU wall that runs along the southerly interior property line. A new CMU wall will be constructed along what essentially is the northeast property line, adjacent to these particular rear residential units, as well as the continuation of that new CMU 8-foot wall along the alleyway off of Wing Street. So there will be consistency throughout the southerly interior property lines of this 8-foot CMU wall to actually block any visibility, both to the parking lot as well as to the loading space. And staff.
What happens to that alleyway?
That alleyway is city alleyway. It's not being used. It will remain as it is currently today. So.
And if somebody drives in through the Wing Street, they're going to just go straight into the wall?
At this point in time, there's a wall, so there is no access off of Wing Street. So no. Staff would recommend that the loading dock be screened by a taller wall, and again, this would be the screening for the loading dock itself, not the wall adjacent to it. But again, if the board chooses, you can increase the height of that rear wall as well. Code actually requires that a 5.5-foot decorative block wall anytime there is a commercial development abutting a multifamily residential zone. So the code limit is actually a 5.5-foot decorative block wall. In this case, there's an existing 8-foot high CMU wall. The board can also request that it be finished or texturized to some degree. And then, obviously, they're proposing just a continuation of that 8-foot high wall. To continue on, signs. Signs under the urban design guidelines are just required to meet code. In this case, no plans were submitted that directly affect the sign program. But based on the submitted elevations, as you see here before you, these, they're somewhat appropriate, and obviously the scale of the signs should be appropriate to the locations of the signs. So whether or not you can, it is within your purview to make any type of recommendations that whether the Fresh and Easy sign facing Colorado is appropriate in terms of scale or whatnot, that is within your purview. But again, the signs themselves right now are not being submitted for your review, that is. Lighting, light spillage. Because you are located directly adjacent to a multifamily residential dwelling, I should also note that there was an environmental initial study that was prepared by the previous case planner. That environmental initial study was reviewed and actually approved by the zoning administrator, because this particular project already has gone through the conditional use permit process for alcoholic beverages. So the conditional use permit, the CUP, has been approved for this particular project for the sale of alcoholic beverages. As part of that, the environmental has already been adopted by the zoning administrator. There were 2 items that specifically had mitigation measures. One dealt with aesthetics, in particular lighting, and so the mitigation measure for that item addressed light spillage as it relates to the adjacent residential uses. There was a requirement that the light standards be no taller than 15 feet and that the light pole shall not be located less than 5 feet from the property line or residential zone boundary, and that light spillage shall not exceed 0.5 candle foot at the residential use property lines. The initial study, well, the final mitigated negative declaration, as well as any of the mitigation measures, were included as part of your packet. The initial study mitigated negative declaration would have to be acknowledged by the board, but just to go back, in terms of light spillage, this somewhat has already been reviewed and addressed by the initial study as well as the zoning administrator. It's also within your purview to address this because it is a concept that is addressed in the urban design guidelines. Again, they are proposing 15-foot high lighting. It has been looked at by the zoning administrator as well in the initial study. Landscape character, and we're coming close towards the end, and I'll try to be brief. The landscaping character, the zoning code requires that 5% of parking lots be landscaped. This particular project well exceeds that. Actually, the project provides 20% of the parking area to be landscaped. So it goes well above and beyond what is required by code. They also meet the code limits that require that 1 canopy shade tree be provided for every 6 parking spaces. It goes well above and beyond. And you see here there is a landscape plan that is before you for your review. All of the proposed landscaping is drought tolerant and low water use plantings. What also has been identified, as you see before you, the screening landscaping that has been proposed for the 5-foot landscaping strip along the southerly property line really addresses the need for that actual screen, because they have provided trees pretty much, on 10 to 15 feet on center throughout that 5-foot landscaping strip. So they have really addressed the landscaping requirements, the screening requirements between the properties, the commercial property site, the project site, as well as the residential uses to the south.
I have a question. What is the code? What are the requirements in terms of the way that those trees are trimmed in the future, given that they're put there specifically to be screens? We see all over the city trees that are topped off, cut, right to the trunk frequently at commercial establishments. Is there a code that prevents them from doing that since it's put there as a screening wall?
No, there is not. Unless it's a protected tree, such as a sycamore, bay laurel, or California oak, there are no requirements or standards regarding the trimming of the trees.
So basically, they could just cut every single leaf off of these and be within their rights.
I would assume that Fresh and Easy would probably not cut every single leaf on. But again, it is within they can trim the trees. Obviously, this is not proposed. None of the trees are protected trees that are being proposed. And the code requirements state that the landscaping, and I'll have to double check this, it's either for a period of 3 to 5 years that the landscaping has to be in place once you have the project go through the design review board process. So it
Let me ask you, there's the monitoring. So what, does that happen through the monitoring that?
unfortunately, based on our manpower, it happens on a case-by-case violation basis. So,
But within 5 years, they could remove all the trees if they wanted to.
well, no, because
No,
they
you
would
couldn't, right.
still need to provide the required landscaping, and canopy shade trees is required by code.
They could remove 15%.
No, in this case, well, they're providing 20%. Obviously, they're providing them throughout the project site, within 5-foot landscaping berms. Essentially, they could remove a portion of it and still be in compliance with the code, but most likely the costs that they've gone into providing irrigation systems, landscaping planners, whatnot.
Bill, yeah.
Yes.
Are you done with, because I have many questions.
You have many questions? We're pretty much done. I just want to also make note, just as a last comment. So although the project complies and goes above what is required by code in terms of landscaping, a highly visible corner location, such as this particular one, especially along the corner of Wing Street in Colorado, could actually, though they have well above and beyond what, the required landscaping along the south, there could be a little bit more landscaping, on the northeast corner of the project. We do have additional staff comments, but perhaps I can answer your questions before I go into comments.
Because I have a fundamental
Yes.
question. Now, the applicant met with the principal urban designer and the senior urban designer.
Correct.
And their main source of, not contention, but concern was placement on the lot. Could you just review for this
Yes.
board member their recommendation and how it would appear on that lot?
They were referring to the fact that when you have a retail store, those retail stores typically go to the back of the lot, they have parking to the front, and they have one main storefront that's visible from all public views. You might have two sides, you might have a loading dock, but you sort of abut the rear. You don't have that four-sided visibility as you would this particular project. Because of that, you don't have these fundamental problems of trying to address multiple street frontages and multiple, viewpoints, both from residences, from Wing Street, Colorado, and then also from Chevy Chase. So typically any type of retail storefront, food store that is, would only have one primary frontage, because it's pushed to the back, they have parking to the front, and maybe two secondary frontages that might not even be visible because you might be in a shopping strip format, so you only have to worry about one frontage. This particular project definitely has 4 visible frontages. And the fact that the placement of the particular, the placement that you have here, right up against Chevy Chase in Colorado, then you have this visibility for all those individuals coming up Chevy Chase and the residential to the south. There was this feeling that if the building itself was actually relocated to the northeast corner, addressing Wing and Colorado, you could still keep the vehicular access here, have your parking here, but then you would be able to go ahead and keep one primary frontage that you'd see because you're driving up Colorado and Chevy Chase. So you'd still have one primary frontage here facing the interior parking lot, and that's consistent with what they're proposing now because one of their main frontages is facing the parking lot. You'd have your main frontage on Colorado, and then Wing Street is somewhat of a more residential, less traveled street. So, this particular street face might be more appropriate. Whereas here you have this street frontage facing a very busy Chevy Chase Boulevard, you have this particular frontage facing the interior parking lot, and then obviously you have the storefront glass windows that are facing Colorado. So I guess, and again, this is only hearsay because I was not part of the discussion, that there was quite a bit of talk that by relocating the building, you would also be addressing quite a few of the other issues. I mean, that's not to say that all of the issues would be eliminated. I mean, there are other issues regarding architectural style or other building treatments or whatnot, but the actual location and orientation, the site planning, could actually improve the project. But again, these discussions were back and forth, and unfortunately, the Fresh and Easy corporate offices said that this would not be something that actually works with their building type and what the programming requirements are for this project.
So are you saying, just so I can clear that, the recommendation from the urban planner was to try to keep as much of the building on both the Chevy Chase and on Colorado so that what you'd end up with would be a longer, narrower building where all the parking is in the back? Because that's what I thought. When I read that comment, I thought that that's what they were.
No,
No.
showing all the parking.
They would essentially, right now, the way that the main building elevations face Colorado Street and the interior parking lot.
I understand
This would be flipped in this direction, so that the main building,
This was
again,
the recommendation of the urban planner?
no, not urban planner. These are the two urban designers, the principal urban.
Sorry, the urban
That
designers.
essentially, well, and it's not just the building elevations, but this building would essentially be relocated to this area. That way you do have a rear that you don't have to worry about because it's facing an alley, and that your parking would go in this particular location, would be centralized.
Was there ever, I mean, obviously they have their programs, what
Exactly.
they would need, but was there ever any talk of doing that, of putting all of the parking in the rear and stretching the building out along Colorado? Because I thought that the whole,
Having an elongated building in this
I thought that the
fashion?
urban guidelines, what it was trying to get at was to put as much parking off of streets that we want to be pedestrian streets as possible. So I'm puzzled as to why we would have half of the parking be right on Colorado when it looks like you could have easily put all of the parking to the rear.
To the rear along
And
here.
just had made the building narrower and then had an alley so that there was a access off of Chevy Chase for cars, but no actual
I mean,
parking.
since I wasn't privy to part of the discussion, I'll turn to Stephanie Reich, and I'm sure the applicant is in the audience, so they've had.
We can talk about it. My quick question.
Yes.
I'm assuming Tom Mitchell has looked at this.
Yes, he has.
He actually okayed this.
Correct, yes. This has been reviewed by Traffic and Transportation
And
as part
he
of the
realizes
environmental.
that it's in the corner of Chevy Chase and Colorado.
Oh, he does.
He's,
He's well aware of it.
I have some other questions.
but.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No. It's fine.
My first question is, on these elevations, the east and the west, where you have this green portion and then you have the beige portion, is it just paint that's different, or is there actually a different finish material?
Well, I think these questions we can ask the architect.
Correct.
So we can just go ahead and.
Okay.
Actually, it just says exterior walls, the Benjamin.
Do we have a sample of what the lights are going to be, or where they are?
No, we do not. None was submitted
Right,
regarding
those
the
were
light
my-
standards. So, but would you like to hear what the actual recommendations were?
Yes, please.
Please.
Sorry. Okay, during these discussions, and I'm just going to read verbatim, this is what, staff repeatedly indicated the majority of the fundamental problems of the project were driven by the store's location at the northwest corner. Staff recommended a reorganization of the site plan, again, to the applicant, but based on the discussion, this is what we just briefly discussed, the applicant responded that the site plan was not acceptable and would not work with the program requirements for the project. The project, as proposed in its current position on the site, could be modified and greatly improved with the subsequent additional comments. Incorporate a secondary access, and a secondary access would be that along Chevy Chase to actually activate the Chevy Chase frontage. If this is not possible, then that signature sail design that's on the northeast corner of the building that, as you best see here, addresses this particular corner, and you see here this would be the corner, and then the one that's facing the interior of the parking lot, that this signature sail actually be relocated to address the intersection of the Colorado and Chevy Chase intersection, and that somehow or other the entrance awning would remain then and have some sort of other architectural feature to indicate the front entrance where it is currently today. And then last but not least would be to wrap the glass storefront around the corner and continue it along Chevy Chase facade. Other topics included, and I'll try to be brief because I know this has been a very detailed and lengthy staff presentation. There's an existing bus stop and curb, street improvements that have been made as part of the Colorado Street Improvement Program. There's a bus stop. The project doesn't really address that existing bus stop. This is sort of somewhat of an opportunity for a project to actually incorporate urban design and address the bus stop that's currently there, either through some sort of trellis feature or whatnot. The project should also clarify at this point the location of the cart storage. It appears that it is right now within the interior of the parking lot in the building itself. And again, they're just minor issues. Special attention should be made to lighting, signage, landscaping, and hardscape. And that, just to be sure that no mechanical equipment on the roof, as per the applicant. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is in the audience, actually, and I'm sure all of us would be able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
At some point, I think maybe we should hear from, I don't know whether it's now.
Well, I want to hear from the applicant, and then we'll go ahead and hear from Stephanie, and then we can collect all that. If you want to take a 5-minute break, absorb it, and then we come back.
Actually, Serenity Ajawara is listed as the applicant. However, Donna Ransom is representing WD Partners this evening.
Okay. Bonnie?
Good evening, Chairman Malikian and board members and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn, and my offices are located here in the city of Glendale. I think we should start off, that was a very detailed presentation, so what I'll try to do is address some of the issues or comments that were made from the staff. First of all, in terms of the project itself, this location in the city and what we're proposing is going to be a huge asset to this neighborhood. We actually looked at a number of different things, and why don't I begin with the site planning issue. From our perspective, it did not make sense to shift the building to the northeast of the lot. We looked at your urban design guidelines. We had discussions in terms of the size of the building and where it was being proposed to be shifted to that didn't work for our program. But put aside that, what's being suggested in these urban design guidelines is to place the building on the corner where we placed it. It's the most sensible, it's the most logical. It also deals with the parking arrangement. The parking, as suggested by the guidelines, would be behind the building, so that your focal point when you're at the corner of Chevy Chase and Colorado is not a parking lot. Rather, it's a building instead. There was some discussion that was made as it relates to the loading area and how the loading area is being addressed and the height of the wall for the loading area. Currently, our loading area has a wall that's 8 feet in height. We actually have a diagram that shows, and I have one copy and I'll hand this to you, in terms of a small portion of the truck as it's backed into the loading area and the small amount that's actually visible over the wall that's being proposed.
Thank you.
Once again, we have 1 to 2 trucks that would be in that loading area per day. There are requirements and regulations that Fresh and Easy has separate from the city as it relates to the length of time they're there in terms of turning off the engines and the treatment of that. So they're very sensitive in terms of the loading and how that's addressed. Also, as it relates to the landscaping, there were some questions from the board members about the landscaping to the south. Now, currently right now on the site, on the south portion of it is the drive-through lane for the existing Burger King. Next to that, directly adjacent to that, to the 2-story apartment building, is a wall. That wall is about 2.5 to 3 feet high. It's not 8 feet high. It's 2.5 to 3 feet high. What we are doing is we are increasing the height of that wall to 8 feet, and we're also providing now a landscape buffer that they currently don't have in terms of being able to provide for aesthetic purposes and also in terms of beautification if people are looking down. There are some other criteria I can give you as it relates to, there was a question about lighting. We have some light standards that we can show. We also have some pack lighting that I can hand out as well that you can take a look at as you deliberate and discuss. Those are some of the information that we can provide. We actually think from our perspective, the landscaping that's been shown, we exceed, I think the code requires 5% for about 1,250 square feet of the parking area, and we're at about 5,000 square feet for about 20% of the parking area. So we have a substantial amount of landscaping that we're providing. In terms of the cart storage area, it's actually on the outside of the building, not the inside of the building, and you could see how the wall is being treated in the perspective drawing that I provided to you. There was a comment or a recommendation made to address the bus stop. I think that those of you that have been in the city now for a number of years know that the city invested a significant amount of money in the Colorado Street Revitalization Program, and that's where the light standards and the bump outs in the roadway and the landscaping that was proposed is consistent all the way down Colorado Street. And that was to make some uniformity to it, which is different than what was being recommended. We are interested in your thoughts. We did have meetings with city staff. They did make recommendations in terms of specifically as it relates to the site planning. And we have a difference of opinion as to what we should be at, where the building should be located at. We feel very strongly about this location and where it's placed. So we're interested in your thoughts and your comments. If there are questions, obviously I'd be happy to answer them. I know my time is up. We do have members from our team in the audience as well.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ronnie?
I have one. Ronnie, you just mentioned that the site planning, the placement, didn't work for, and your words were our program. It didn't work for our program. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? What is, when you say our program, what does that entail?
Well, there's really a few things, Mr. Carter. There's one thing we looked at was, and I have a copy here, and I'm sure you guys have a copy. This is the urban design guidelines. It's almost, this illustration that's shown here is almost our exact project. So in terms of consistency with what's being recommended, it would certainly make sense to follow the guidelines. That was one thing. The second thing is to the program. When you look at the way that the building is laid out and the way that it functions, if you were to try to put it in that northeast corner, the square footage of the building and the layout does not work placing it in the northeast corner. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the program.
Would it reduce the square footage?
Yes.
Any amount did you...
I think there were some studies done, but that was just one component of it. There was another component as it relates to the loading area and how that would then be placed and how that would function. And overall, it didn't seem logical in terms of relocating that building in that corner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I have a similar site planning question. So when first of all, I'm glad that this project's going in. Regardless of the building itself, I'm glad that they're going to be getting rid of the Burger King and getting a grocery store, so no arguments there. And I also agree about keeping the bulk of the building on that corner. I think you're right that is more in keeping with the urban guidelines. So my question is, why would it not have worked to elongate the building so that it ran almost the whole lot on the Colorado side and then use that eastern side as your loading dock and driveway without the parking lot and putting all the parking in the back?
Board Member Friedman, in terms of the different options, we looked at some different concepts, and I would have to defer to a couple folks on my project team about that, but that was not one that was discussed and recommended. It was certainly different than what we had envisioned in terms of the elongation of the store. This is the prototype in terms of the way it functions. This is the way that functions most efficiently from Fresh and Easy's perspective. But I can't address your comment because we didn't study that. We studied 4 or 5 different variations of where the building should be placed on the site, but not that.
I just have one quick one.
One more question.
Yeah. What are the elements that work into the branding as we look at this perspective? What are the elements that are part of the branding for Fresh and Easy? Can you show them on this perspective?
I think I'd probably defer to Donna Ranson to do that. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and board members. My name is Donna Ransom, and I office at Evergreen DevCo at 200 North Maryland in your fine city. And the main branding from the elevation standpoint is the sail at the entry. That's the Fresh and Easy's brand. It's part of their prototype store. And so that's their main branding element. Their color scheme is also a big part of their branding. And this site, I will let you know, is a little bit smaller than a prototype-sized, just the overall size of the area that they put a prototype store on. It's also probably a little bit differently shaped. You know, it would be great if this was a perfect square. I think that would probably alleviate a lot of the problems. But it's not. And so to a little bit elaborate on the part about putting it on the other corner, if you look at the square that is the building area, including the loading dock, when we flipped that over to move it to the other corner, initially we thought maybe we could squeeze it in there. But the assumption was that the alley was ours, and in looking at it that further, the alley is not part of this project, and so you'd have to eliminate the truck dock, and it still wouldn't work.
In terms of the branding, is there ways that you normally treat walls? I think the concern I have is the Chevy Chase facade. Is there something within the branding in terms of how you deal with facades? Because you must have, you're doing box buildings a lot, I mean, within the brand. Is there something that is normally done within the brand?
Well, our prototype is what we submitted initially, and that has the gray CMU wall in the back and also on one of the sides of the building. So these are definitely enhanced elevations that we are presenting. As far as the big, I think one of the major concerns that the urban planners had was wrapping the glazing around the side of the building. The problem is if you look at the fixture plan, that's where the freezer boxes are, and the Fresh and Easy would basically have to revamp their store plan and, you know, shuffle everything around interior, which it doesn't work. This is a prototype layout. It's a prototype store that affects everything that, you know, all the ways that they do their business. And to that end, that is the same point of trying to design a site-specific custom site to fit into a spot when the location is clearly consistent with the design guidelines and will fit on the hard corner.
Is the architect here?
The architect was not available to join us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Do you have any more questions? All right. I'm going to close and have Stephanie explain to us what their thoughts were.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, while the guidelines do suggest the buildings generally in that area, in commercial areas, to be located on the property line, the intent of the guideline is to activate the streets. And that particular provision of locating the building on the property line is is not really meant to be in absence of any of the other qualities, street orientation qualities in buildings. And so there is a quintessential challenge to meet the guidelines with the big box building type. And because there was a primary objective here by the applicant to not design a three-dimensional big box, but to really locate a pedestrian-oriented type facade on really only one facade, that's why we suggested the placement, which is really, you might say, counter to the letter of the guidelines to have the parking at the corner, but we thought more in the spirit and intent of the guidelines with their particular program. Also minimize the visibility of the truck dock, and as Vilja was mentioning, all of the back sides of the building. We were simply would prefer not to have the back sides of the building at the property line on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Would you like to start the discussion or take a break, or do you?
I'm fine with
Discussion.
onward.
You know, maybe as a little preamble, I'd always said that I wouldn't have any knee-jerk responses to any of these projects. But suddenly in my second meeting, I sort of do have a knee-jerk response. I see urban planners, titles bandied about, and so I say, go plan. And so their reaction to the placement, I take very seriously. And so I invite my colleagues here I guess this is what we need to dive into. Is this placement something that will benefit the city of Glendale? Colorado Boulevard, let me just add, driving this site, Colorado Boulevard for 6 or 7 blocks in either direction there is a block. It could be Magnolia, Burbank Boulevard, any place in North Hollywood, which grew, maybe in the 1920s, there were tires discarded in a lot. And so somewhere along the line, that became a tire store. Let's sell. And so it was that kind of commercial unfolding, which is nothing wrong with that. That's free enterprise and initiative. But now we are in an era where we're purporting to say, okay, we have urban design guidelines. We pick a day, and from that day forward, we try and address things in a design manner. So I invite my colleagues, and I am totally open to, I can be persuaded 6 different ways on this. So help me.
Okay.
I think that what the urban planners were grappling with was really this idea of trying to find a way to reconcile the idea of the urban streetscape on Colorado with a big box building. And to me, the problem here is not the idea of creating an urban streetscape, it's the idea of the big box building. I think the problem here is that we're getting a building that's just not trying hard enough to be an urban building. And until it does, I just don't think it's going to work. I like the placement of the building because I think that's more important than taking a big box store and finding a place to hide it on an important corner. I think is the wrong way to go about it. So I agree that it should be where it is, essentially. But I don't agree with with something that looks so obviously like a big box store being on an important urban intersection in our city. That said, I don't know, I certainly am not an engineer by any means, nor do I pretend to know anything about grocery stores except where to find the sale aisle, maybe. And I don't know how this alley fits into anything, but when I first looked at this, I thought, well, if I was really going to go by the letter of what I think the urban guidelines are, I would have the entire Colorado side of this lot be this building with an alley at the end, maybe running into the alley that's there for people to access a parking lot in the rear. To me, that's what the urban guidelines call for. I don't know why they couldn't do that. I don't know whether they're not allowed to have any traffic going into that alley or how that works and whether it's possible, but if it was possible, that's what I would like to see the site plan. Because I think if you really are encouraging people to be pedestrians on Colorado, you don't want them walking down past a parking lot, even a nice parking lot, if you can help it. So I don't know if that's at all possible, if anyone looked at that, but that would be my inclination. And then just beyond that, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the building. I don't even care whether the green and the yellow portions are different materials, because to me, it just kind of needs to go back and be rethought. I think that those little trellis elements look like a really not very good attempt to hide a big box store, and I think it needs to become a real urban store rather than something that you would see in a suburban area behind a giant parking lot.
Okay. Really?
I believe that rear alleyway that's off of Wing Street was not looked at as a two-way driveway or two-way accessway, simply because it only has a 15-foot wide width. And typically, Traffic and Transportation Department staff requests that an alleyway for two-way traffic be a minimum of 22 to 25 feet. And so that was one of the parameters as to why this particular alleyway was not considered for access.
Well, I mean,
And also the
there's
fact that-
definitely a solution for that.
Right.
They already have 3 extra parking spaces. They can lose one, widen that, give part of that, but that's just...
So that's my suggestion, is that we if we're going to look at this, that we look at that as a site plan. Why not make this building a long, narrow building all along here with a driveway and 2 layers of parking in the back?
Well, let's talk about that.
And then in terms of, let's go back, let me just talk about the loading dock thing. I mean, if the loading dock can go onto the east side, I think that is certainly preferable to having it in the back. The screening, I'm sure that they don't have any intention now of getting rid of all of those trees and all that, but I've seen these kinds of things happen over the years where it becomes a maintenance issue for some tenant and they decide to cut it all. And if we're stacking everything on a line of trees protecting single-family residences from trucks, I can understand the city's concern.
I think what's interesting about it is, that's great. They obviously picked this lot because it is a corner lot. It's a busy street. I'm sure the traffic count was great. I completely agree the building should be on the corner. That is where it should be. I don't have any problem with that. But along with that opportunity comes a responsibility that you make a building that addresses the corner. That is the flip side of that coin. So I think it's critical that corner has to be important. I think it's that west facade, I think is, that's like a driveway facade. That's not a facade on the main street. So I don't have any problem with that, but you need to know that if you're on the corner, it needs to really address the corner. I know you have an issue with the way that internal works. You're trying to do a layout that would work elsewhere. Those are all issues that I think can be addressed. Those are freezers. They're probably going up to 6 or 7 feet. There's opportunity above that. There could be a window. There's some stuff on the south side that you have lower freezers, and then there's ones on that other side that are higher. Maybe you interspect some lower freezers so that you could have a window that addresses the street. I think there's a lot that can be done there that isn't being done, and I think it's critical that you're on that main corner and you're doing that element, that it needs to really address the corner and be interesting. And like I said, I don't have any problem with being on the corner, but if you are on the corner, there is that responsibility. So I think that is the trade-off. Otherwise, move it elsewhere so that you don't have that issue. But the alley thing for me, I don't necessarily mind. I think if you had busy traffic, let it go onto the busy streets, not onto the residential streets. So the alley issue doesn't bother me as much. I think if it was a long building that went along Colorado, I think that would be nice. I'm sure having a really long building would be difficult organizationally. So I know I can understand that too. I know on a market you probably don't want to have 2 entrances. That's sort of an issue. I can agree with that. But you do need to address the fact of the corner. Those facades, I think, are, in my mind, almost unacceptable. So.
All right, thank you. I see quite a bit of issues, both as site planning and also as design. So I'm going to kind of go step by step, whatever I see, and I want to comment on that and see if we can resolve some of the issues. I first of all agree that the building should be located in the corner, and the reason is if this building is pushed to where it's being suggested, I think the way that the architect has approached the design of this building, we're going to get a lot worse building, because they're going to look at the ends that are butting the property line as being the back of the building, and they're going to treat it as the way that they have treated this. I think we have a very good opportunity right now to address all the corners that is visible to the street, and I think it would really activate that corner. One of the issues that I have is that placing this building in the corner, and I'm not sure why this wasn't addressed under the traffic when Tom Mitchell looked at this. One of the conditions that when you do a corner building in City of Los Angeles, they require a substantial amount of setback in the corner, visible site of turning. And placing this building right up almost to the property line, I think what it's going to do is it's going to create a view blockage there for the people who are turning. So I think by simply flipping or somehow locating this entrance, bringing it in the corner and working on the details there, I think that may actually solve that corner condition and solve this site planning issue. I think the other problem that I see on the parking is the actual circulation. I mean, the truck circulation. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have visited there, but if you can just kind of zoom out of this site, the closest section, closest off-ramp from the freeway to this site is all the way to the east of this property. So any truck that is coming down to feed this building, they're going to come from the east, unless they exit off of the 2 freeway or South Glendale, and I highly doubt that. I think they're going to come up through the closest off-ramp and exit. And the direction that these trucks are coming, they're going to go around and around. And they were very concerned about the trucks being able to access this side and not using the residential zone. But unfortunately, the way that it's going to work is the trucks coming in, going around, doing a loop around the residential part, or going down Glendale Avenue, coming up Chevy Chase, and the way that they're showing this. And the way that they're exiting is going back again against the opposite direction that they're supposed to exit out. So I think my solution to this deal of intersection and then turning and everything, I think that somehow this alleyway needs to be incorporated into this key site planning. And the alleyway, I think it's going to help them by actually coming into the Wing Street, which is the first part of this beginning of this commercial zone, and then literally backing into this and taking the alley and going straight into this, and somehow working the alleyway as being a component of this turnaround area. Because truly, this traffic, the way that it's been kind of showing, every truck driver needs to get a copy of this, and they need to memorize this turning radius, because this is the only way that's going to work in order for them to access this loading area. And I don't think they're going to have one single driveway that is going to memorize this thing, and they're going to have many other people coming. Looking at the building itself, I think, let me talk about the landscaping a little bit. I'm not sure about the species that was used. I would rely on Laura to tell me somewhat of the trees and the species that they have proposed. But I think there may be a good opportunity for them to, rather than having, we heard so much about 20% landscaping. I think the landscaping is a result of the ending of certain parking spaces. So I think somehow incorporating this landscaping better around the building, and somehow screening and making the landscaping be part of the actual massing in the building, I think that would definitely help. and rather than having these trellises without having any planting underneath, and I'm not sure what they're going to do. My thoughts on the building, I'm going to show you a detail that I saw that actually, it somewhat bothers me of kind of summarizes my thinking of how the architect has treated the architecture of the building. When you look at this perspective, the tendency of this perspective is that you kind of see this thing kind of coming out and creating this three-dimensional effect, and this volume being an actual volume, this square box that is kind of inserted into this, and creating some interest here. But when you look at the elevation, this box is pretty much flush with all sides of that. So what that means is it's just a plaster box that it's been separated by just painting, or that's pretty much it. It's just painting and creating this form here that it's just, why is it there? I mean, I can just take the hand and remove it. You still have this nice square box. I mean, I'd rather see that. So I think if elements like these are being added, and such as the meeting resulted for the cornices to come in just because it was like a basic box, I think it's a lost opportunity. I'm assuming that this building is going to be a block building. So if it is a block building and you're attaching plaster against the block, I think there are many examples of shopping centers around in Burbank, other places that you can start playing with the, textured block with some attachments, and maybe that the parapets are kind of lowered at certain areas now that you don't have air conditioning equipment. You can start moving these elements, maybe some parts of it actually goes over and creates this volumes that are like more of a three-dimensional that it's projecting. So I think there's a lot of different ways of attacking this problem. But my initial thought was, there's always a beginning of a design approach, and there's always a beginning, and there's always a middle and an ending. And to me, the ending came first, which is the aisleways, the way that the entire store needed to function, and then the dimensions were placed in, all the details were placed in, then you came up with the box, and then now you said, okay, well, now we got to have deal with the elevation. Okay, let's raise the elevation. Okay, now, well, this is the front. Okay, well, we're going to need a front view so somehow people can see what we're selling inside. Well, on the sides, we don't care, even though that both Chevy Chase and Colorado are primary streets, and they're both located in the corner intersection. So I think the approach should have been from outside in, being that, design review needs to approve this project rather than inside out. And I feel sorry, and I feel bad because looking at this set of documents, and all the way up to the mullions have been even picked and designed, whereas if this is what we want to talk about, is why a center glazed mullion? I mean, this is a package that I received, and we can go ahead and get into this and start talking about all these little details. And why not inset to create more reveal, of the glass, and some cases, maybe we do have glazing that it's on the outside, and we have butt glazing that goes in front. So if the package is doing literally a shop drawing of window design and mullion breakage, and I mean, if you want us to comment on this, I mean, we can definitely go ahead and comment on that. But I think it's just way too advanced of this, getting this kind of information of 147 inches and to be field verified. So I think getting this type of a project, there's a lot more other major issues than getting the nitty-gritty on the roll-up door attachments and how the detailing attachments are going to be. So I think we definitely want to go back, look at this, and two projects come to my mind for this. One is corner of Las Feliz and San Fernando, which was recently built. It was the, I believe it's the
Rite Aid?
yeah, Rite Aid.
Rite Aid?
And I see that as being the same kind of condition. Maybe we can look at that and study that and learn from the mistakes maybe, or learn from the positive things that came about. And the other thing is, with all this parking and somehow kind of coming to this site after the fact of where the building was situated, I somehow, and knowing that this, hopefully this is going to be a very active shopping center, I just, and combining so intensely the trucking and the pedestrian parking, I just see this site as being another in and out site, which everybody hates to even mention. So I think site planning, parking is definitely an issue. I think location-wise, I don't have a problem with. I think size of the building, I don't have a problem with. But I think the entrance should be addressed more appropriately to the actual corner rather than creating a backdrop to the Chevy Chase. I think the Chevy Chase and Colorado are important. I don't want to get into the interior, but, you know, if I'm getting it as part of my DRB, this detailed of the package, then, you know, I'm assuming that, you know, the applicants want us to address that. I hate attachments that are unnecessary to the design of the building. I think attachments of the sale, I look at it as an attachment, and I think if it becomes more of a three-dimensional volume rather than a plaster box that it's been cut off at the top, creating this volume, I think that's going to be substantially a much better design. And also, I think the treatments that we have in front of the facing Colorado, I think the same thought process should occur. May not be as tall as that, but again, Mr. Guerrero has had a great idea that, you know, maybe you have a clear story windows above, and somehow bring activity along both major streets. So that was my thoughts, and I think I covered everything.
There's a point of clarification. The trellises on the elevations in here show greenery. Are they actually practical, or are they?
Probably not, and if it's high-trafficked area, you know, I mean, Whole Foods has trellises, and they've managed to get their plants to grow on them. But, you know, what's interesting about the Whole Foods building, and of course it's a building they reused, it wasn't a building they built, but they did a lot of renovation to it, is they kind of show that there's more materials in the world than stucco and glass, you know, and trellis. And that's a pretty big building, and also it's a building with more than one entrance, where even though it's set way back, it's a very active building all around two sides. And, you know, what I would say is, rather than giving, in this case, specific suggestions, I think the clear story suggestion is a great one, but really they need to take even a further step back and say, are we doing a big box store? And are we doing a big box store that we're going to just do a little bit of decoration on? When I look at this, it's just a big box store, and I'm going to find it very hard to vote for a big box store in any, no matter how much you tack on the side of it in this location. I think this needs to be thought of as a building first, as an urban building, that with four sides that are going to, that people are going to walk around and look at. And until it does that, you know, I don't think any small suggestions we might make about, you know, moldings and windows or anything like that are going to do much good. I'm sure that their architect, if they do a little bit of paradigm change in the way they're thinking about this building, can come up with something that's acceptable.
You know, one other thing I wanted to talk about is there's another building on Glen Oaks, Jones Market, and I somehow visualize this building as being like maybe half of that, which is the part that is facing the adjacent property, and you have this you know, the loading bay, the truck bay, and essentially all the boxes, all the recycling boxes, the trash, everything is pretty much set outside. And for such a large building to get this size of a trash area, I think that needs to be thought of also. And I'm not sure, I'm assuming that trellis kind of checkered piece is the trash for this 14,000 square foot building that has all these. So I think there's quite a bit of elements there, and I'm not really convinced about. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but I'm just not knowledgeable about the mechanical parts of it. That we're saying that we won't have any mechanics on the rooftop, and it's going to be all enclosed. So I don't have that knowledge to comment on that. And at the end of the day, if we're going to end up putting some of these, all these refrigerators that they need refrigeration equipment on the rooftop, and how are they going to be?
I would love to see a study of it's showing me why it has to be that half the Colorado streetscape has to be parking. I still have that question, and maybe there's really good reasons for it, but it seems arbitrary, and I thought that the idea that what we were trying to do with our urban planning was to activate that streetscape, and I don't think a parking lot ever does that. So
I think, in my mind, there's a lot of really great buildings in urban environments that are sort of flush to the street. So, again, I don't have a problem with the location, but the thing that's so great about any of these stores is when you get inside, I mean, it's the lighting and all the colors and all the great stuff. In my mind, wouldn't it be neat if that Chevy Chase facade had the glass? I mean, when you look at the floor plan, I know it's a prototype, and that's the problem with the prototype. You put, all these freezers on the wall that's the main street. I know it's a prototype, but it's not going to fit this location. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, in my mind, almost if you flip the internal, such that when you're driving up Chevy Chase, wouldn't it be neat if you saw these big windows on that facade and you looked in and you saw all the produce and the color and the activity? It seems like that's a positive. And I don't know that you necessarily have to walk in from that street. I can understand why the entrance has to be from the parking lot. It's the only way that makes sense. I mean, I understand that.
I think the exterior is going to be really, really important, how they treat it.
No, absolutely. That is. What I'm saying is, but to start that, I'm saying if you thought about it and there were windows there as a starting point, that along that facade you had windows. I mean, just to get into that.
The problem is that they came up with the floor plan first. They came up with the layout of this.
Right. No, I understand. I understand completely.
And then they went outside. But going back to Laura's comment, I have no problem of asking them to elongate this so we hide the parking along Colorado. But my initial thought would be is let's wait and see what they come up with on the actual building itself. Because if this is the architecture that they're going to insist on proposing and the simple, plastered foam, decoration, more of this I don't think I can handle. So I want to minimize that as much as possible. So I think, putting these fake trellises, I think that's another. There's no landscaping. Landscaping doesn't show anything. There's no planters shown. None of the site plan is. So again, and then, coming up with only 3 colors, maybe you have, again, some exposed block and you have some steel that it's not painted and hidden away. Steel is a steel, so maybe we could use some steel color. I mean, I know these are all the colors but again, there's no reason for be so bland and have 2 basic colors to address all of these elements there. I mean, unless the architecture has been done so nicely that the color doesn't become an issue. But right now, there's nothing else to look at. It's just square box with these colors that are being placed in. So,
well, I'm ready to make a motion if nobody has anything to say.
Before you do that, not to prolong the discussion, but since we are trying to be rigorous with our record of decision, if I could just briefly read back some comments to make sure we have it right. So what we've heard is that the consensus is that the building should be on the corner and address the corner to be a true urban store. There's a concern that the truck dock is located in the wrong place and direction for circulation of trucks to and then on the site. Combining service and customer parking is problematic for the reasons that have been stated. The approach to this building, because it's a unique site, should be to design the site design in the building from the outside in rather than the inside out. And more specifics on the building, there are some elements on the building that are not authentic to the building itself. The sail and the trellises, or perhaps that's green screen, have been noted. So there's a potential to use the building materials in a more authentic way rather than the use of stucco and color as the only architectural elements. And then to show, this is a little bit of a translation of what we heard, but to show, to locate all the mechanical equipment so we don't have to guess or be surprised that it's on the roof or wherever it is. Trash enclosure seems inadequate, and that there should be some lessons learned from some projects in the city and elsewhere. Corner of Los Feliz and San Fernando was mentioned, that there can be some lessons learned taken from that. Suggestion to look at Whole Foods, even though that was a reuse building. Look at the Jones Market as well to compare some utilization of that property.
Not to do what they've done, not use it as a utilization, but
right, to
avoid such a
okay, I'll make that clear, to avoid that condition in the future. And those are the salient points.
Stephanie, if I may just add one, because I was thinking it, but it didn't come up. I would support staff's comments on addressing the bus stop as a point, because I'm a big fan of public transportation. If gas prices go up much higher, we're all going to be at that bus stop. But I think it is an opportunity to do something. I don't know what that opportunity is, but I would invite that addition.
Two other things. One, I just want to repeat the staff comment about activating the Chevy Chase side. And also, I would still like to have an answer or to see why it was. I would still like to have the parking lot on the Colorado side addressed to see whether it can be minimized or done away with completely, so that we have a true urban design rather than a building floating in the middle of a parking lot.
So would that be parking on Chevy Chase or on?
To see if it's possible. It may not be possible. I know that it's an oddly shaped. To minimize or do away completely with the parking that's on Colorado, and to change the shape of the building so you can get all the parking on the rear.
Okay, very good. Also, as some overall comments, if you'd like me to add these, a general comment that a prototype may not fit this location, if you'd like me to add that.
No. Do you want to fit? No.
Why not?
You want to add that?
I mean, I think that isn't that the gist of what we've been saying? That they're trying to use a building that was designed for a site that didn't have any constraints, basically. Or why are you uncomfortable with that?
Well, I think...
I gleaned that from some of your comments. If you'd like me to strike that from our record,
I don't think I
can.
have a problem with the actual building and the actual location. I think I have more problem with the actual site circulation and the architectural design, the way that they approach this. I don't want to say we don't want this project here. I mean, if they find that they can solve the circulation and the corner conditions, I don't have a problem with this project. But I think that may result in changing the boxiness of this building and may come out of that prototype. But I don't think we should put a comment there that we don't like the prototype, and I don't.
Okay,
think
so we don't.
I have a thought on that, actually, because I was sitting here thinking of the prototype and our program. I mean, there is a sort of rigidity, but I guess we won't actually know it or see it until something is submitted. So I will support striking that, but I certainly sympathize with the thought of including it. So.
Well, maybe,
Again, I don't want to add anything that we haven't heard here, so thanks for the clarification.
One other item, just make sure that when they come back, because part of this embellishments and stuff that they're putting on, it will be a lot easier if this roof plan is drawn a little bit more accurately, so that we can understand we didn't have this perspective, so I wasn't able to kind of understand what was going on. So that is...
So
Mr.
provide an
Malikian, one point that you raised that I really hadn't thought of, but now cannot think of anything else, is the traffic pattern with trucks eastbound on Colorado from the 5. That will be a real issue there. And is that, it has been to traffic, and they've had a generally supportive view of it, but I thought it was a good point.
We can certainly mention that that there's a concern about that will help emphasize some of the other concerns with the site planning.
Unless they come back and say, the deliveries are going to be done with the small little minivans, they're not going to come with the, semi-trucks. And the only way that these semi-trucks are going to come are from the freeway, and the closest one, it's just logical.
Again,
Actually, can you just ask a question to traffic? And it may have been within their study that they came down Colorado, they made a left turn on Chevy Chase, and then they made a left turn into the site. Just clarify if that is a possibility or not, because if that route is a problem, it would be nice to know that. But if that was studied and isn't a problem, then them coming down Colorado wouldn't be a problem. So that could be clarified.
And these, would you like for these to be, the way that they're starting to be written is more like concerns and issues rather than a typical condition where we're saying not this but this. Because the conversation has been more broad tonight, it's maybe less appropriate to provide the kinds of specific conditions that we often do on a project.
I have one other suggestion for them to, we talked about this alley, but if they consider, it will solve a lot of problems, but if they consider eliminating maybe this parking and moving this line back up and placing landscape, whatever, this alleyway could be essentially used for both people to exit or the trucks, if Tom Mitchell agrees that they can make a right turn here, they can simply come here and just back in and not have this kind of, it just makes it a lot simpler. But again, I know the concern is that not use the Wing Street as the exiting, but logically, when we look at this, Wing Street, the first part of, we have this, the essentially this part of the entire Colorado is commercial. So anything that happens, it's going to happen here. I don't think a truck is going to come and go down they're going to want to make a turn and get onto the Colorado. But using this, I think it's really important for us to be able to use that alleyway as part of the exiting and not concentrate on the Colorado. All the residents are already used to all these commercial activities in the front, the beginning of that street anyways. So it's not something that we're introducing something new.
So with all of that, then I'd still like to propose a motion to return for redesign with those comments.
Do I have a second?
I would second that.
So I have a motion made by Board Member Friedman, a second by Board Member Carter. Roll call. Board Member Carter?
Aye.
Board Member Friedman?
Yes.
Board Member Garagos?
Yes.
Chairman Malikian?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously, 4-0.
We didn't have to do anything on the environmental, correct?
You would need to acknowledge it, actually.
Now or when they come back? Do we do it, don't we do it when they come back?
We could do it when they come back.
I think we should.
When a final decision has been made, then.
Was there anything that we can, have you guys read it? Maybe it will help them?
I glanced at it, it's fine, it's just that if they do change traffic circuit, I mean, you know, lighting and things like
right.
that might be impacted, so
Okay.
we should, no point in, I don't think it will, but.
Okay.
No, and the other items, you know, the two topics for mitigation measures, one addresses the aesthetic, which would be the lighting, and the second one addresses noise, which would be the hours for the loading dock and the idling of the trucks.
I just don't feel comfortable doing it piecemeal, I think it's better to do it all at once.
That is perfectly appropriate, so.
All right, then, approval of the minutes.
Yes, you only received in your packet the minutes from April the 10th. You did not receive the May 8th, as we're not ready in time for your packet. So we ask that you just vote on the May 10th minutes.
We did receive it?
All I got was the assessment one. The assessment, whatchamacallit, the joint one.
I don't think we got any.
You should have received Thursday, April 10th, and Board Member Friedman was absent. Only Board Member Malikian, Carter, and Garagos. If you'd like, here's a copy to look at. You're welcome to either continue them to the next date or not.
Yeah, I didn't get,
Would you like to just read through this and then to make
I
a
think we can vote on
that, you know?
Yeah.
I take a peek at that one. Sure.
While he's looking, I will say that with one of the projects we got, it was Alan, you had included the old plans with the new plans, which is new for us. That's the first time I've seen that done. I think that's very positive
It is.
to do that.
Yeah, actually.
So I wanted to just acknowledge that.
There are a few of us that... But thank you for acknowledging it, yes, and we will...
I'm just killing time here, okay?
In the future, we will make sure that all the old plans are submitted with the new ones.
So funny. That one approving the garage when it's illegal. That was really funny.
Can I hand this over to you and you can give this back to me? Or I don't need it?
I'm sorry.
Never mind.
Yes, if...
Just answered myself. That's for Alan.
Yes, however you prefer, you're welcome to go ahead
Do
and
you
leave,
want to hold on to it?
Alan.
Maybe have an extra one in your file because I'm not...
We would appreciate you either keeping
Okay.
the Allen project for 2 weeks and bringing it back with you, or if that is inconvenient, I'd be more than happy to keep it, and then we'll send it out, but we do not have any more colored elevations for Allen. So we ask that you either keep it or give it back to me, and I'll send it out.
You know, and I'd ask my chair, who's also going to recuse himself from the Allen, when they're setting the agenda, could you place Allen first
Or last.
or last?
Because I would assume that we would, because the case was supposed to be heard today, and we had quite a number of individuals that wished to speak, and the fact that they knew that it was continued to a date certain, which is in 2 weeks, I would assume that all of those individuals are going to show up, and perhaps we could put it first, and then those that wish to recuse themselves.
Could show up a little later. Could be watching it on a television somewhere and get over here.
Correct.
minute
Except
that Mike
for the
makes a
chairman
motion.
would have to be here to open
I
the
have
meeting.
to be here, yes.
Actually, the order of the agenda is set out by the code, but as was noted earlier, the chair is free to reorder the agenda.
Correct.
I like that.
Excellent.
But you'd have to be here to reorder the agenda to place it last.
I'll be here, definitely, I'll be here.
And you'll place it last.
Exactly. I would recommend you being here.
You might want to tell the viewing audience that case
Maybe
is going
you
to
should
be
do
last.
that. It will be the last item on the agenda.
We have a big agenda for next time?
We actually have 3 items already on the agenda.
Are we okay with the minutes?
Yeah, it's fine.
We're
Yes,
okay?
yes, I would
Make a motion.
make a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, April 10th.
Correct.
A second motion?
I have a motion by Board Member Carter, a second by Board Member Garagos. Board Member Carter?
Aye.
Board Member Garagos?
Aye.
Board Member Friedman?
Abstaining?
Abstaining, that's right. And Chairperson Malikian?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0.
Okay, so I think that's it. We did get the filing procedures, and is there any discussion on that, copies of that, or we
No,
don't need to?
those-
This is just for us,
Those copies are for your records,
for
yes.
our records?
And as I mentioned, the discussion of the new practice of record of decision will, or draft record of decision, will be happening the next time you meet. Are there any other topics you'd like us to add to that discussion? Keep in mind that we will very soon, within the next several weeks, be scheduling a sort of orientation study session discussion where we'll talk more fully about the myriad of changes that council has asked us to make and that you've started to see in our practice and in our staff report, et cetera, and get your feedback on how it's going.
Okay, thank you.
Can these actually just be inserted into the binder?
Yes.
So they are the actual pages?
They're the actual
Okay.
pages, so if you take out the old pages, substitute them with the new pages,
Okay.
you would have then the most current zoning code you have.
Just one item, again, I just wanted to reiterate the Allen project that has been continued. I'm going to move that down to the last item because I'm going to recuse myself. Mr. Carter's going to recuse himself. So if anybody wants to come in later on that day, it's going to be scheduled later on. So
Noted.
Do we know if we're going to have a quorum?
At this point in time, we have not heard anyone stating that they will not be available, so we will make sure that at least the 3 members who will be allowed to vote, which would be Board Member Freeman, Board Member Garagos, and Board Member Zarifian, that you do come in 2 weeks.
Okay, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.